Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into Psalm 4 using the New Living Translation. And I'm really excited to explore this one with you.
Yeah, me too. It's a powerful piece of writing, full of emotion and some beautiful imagery.
Absolutely. I mean, the Psalm takes us on this journey from a place of real distress to a place of incredible peace. And it's structured almost like a song.
It is. And it's important to remember that the Psalms were originally songs, often sung with musical accompaniment.
Oh, really? So how do we know that?
Well, there are actually clues right within the text itself. It mentions stringed instruments.
Wow. So it's like we're getting a glimpse into this ancient concert as we read it.
Yeah, exactly. There's a whole other layer to our understanding when we consider that musical element.
That's so cool. So, getting into the psalm itself, it starts with David. He's the author, and he's feeling super trapped, calling out to God. He says, "Answer me when I call, O God, who declares me innocent." There's this urgency in his words. It's like he's backed into a corner. What do you think is going on there?
Well, I think it speaks to the raw honesty of the Psalms. David isn't afraid to express his emotions, his fear, his frustration. He's just pouring his heart out to God, seeking vindication, seeking deliverance. And I think that feeling of being hemmed in, it's something a lot of people can relate to even today. We all experience that kind of pressure at some point in our lives.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've all felt that way at some point.
All right.
But then in verse 2, it's interesting. He shifts gears a little bit and addressing these, he says, "you men." And he doesn't hold back. He calls them out, calling out their obsession with worthless things.
Right. And I think it's worth pointing out that these worthless things he's talking about, they're not just random objects or trinkets,
Mm-hmm.
They represent anything that pulls us away from what truly matters. The things we chase after that ultimately leave us empty.
Oh, I see. So it's like in David's situation, surrounded by enemies and political intrigue. I mean, maybe these worthless things for him were power, status, or even the approval of others, those kinds of things.
Exactly.
It really makes you stop and think about, what are those worthless things in our lives today?
Yeah.
Is it social media or the endless pursuit of just more stuff? It's like a good gut check for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and then there's this word that keeps popping up throughout the psalm, Selah. It's kind of mysterious, like a pause button or something.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that?
Yeah, Selah. It's interesting. Scholars believe it was probably a musical or liturgical instruction. So maybe indicating a pause for the instruments, or a moment for the listeners to really absorb the words.
I see. So it's kind of like a built-in moment of reflection, hold on, let that sink in for a minute.
Exactly. Yeah. A moment to pause and reflect.
Okay, so moving on, we get to verse 4, and it says, "Tremble with fear and do not sin." This is one of those verses that always makes me stop and think. It's not exactly, warm and fuzzy feeling, but there's a powerful truth there. How do you interpret that one?
Yeah, it's a very strong statement, that's for sure. But I think it's crucial to remember the context here. In the previous verse, David is highlighting God's special favor toward those who are righteous. So it's not about fear-mongering, but more about recognizing the gravity of our choices. Choosing to align ourselves with God has significant consequences, just as choosing those worthless things does.
Right, yeah. It's about understanding the power of choosing the right path, So then, in verses 6 and 7, we see this interesting comparison between material wealth, things like grain and wine, and then the joy that's found in God's favor. It's like David is saying, true happiness. It isn't about what you own, but about where you choose to place your trust. What do you think?
I think that's a great way to put it. And it's worth noting that he's not condemning wealth, or enjoying the good things in life, but he's definitely putting them in their proper perspective. They're not the ultimate source of joy. They're not the end-all be-all.
Yeah, they're not the thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's more about finding that deeper satisfaction that comes from something greater.
Exactly.
And ultimately, that's where David finds peace. The psalm ends on this incredibly peaceful note, verse 8. "In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety." It's like he's gone from this feeling of being trapped to finding this true security.
It's a beautiful resolution to the psalm. And it's also important to note that this peace he's talking about, it's not just like a fleeting emotion, it's an act of trust in God. It's a trust that's been forged through his struggle, through his honesty, and his choice to place his faith in something greater than himself.
So, we've really journeyed with David here, from this place of distress and uncertainty to this place of deep peace and trust. It's really a powerful reminder that even when we feel surrounded, there's a path forward, a way to find that unshakable peace.
Absolutely.
So as we kind of wrap up here, what stands out to you the most from this deep dive?
I think for me, what really stands out is the invitation to examine our own lives, to ask ourselves, what are those worthless things we're holding on to that might be robbing us of that same peace that David ultimately finds? And what would it look like for us to cultivate that same trust, that trust in something bigger than ourselves, even when we feel hemmed in by all of life's challenges? That's something worth pondering for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. And listeners, we hope this exploration of Psalm 4 encourages you to seek that same peace and trust in your own lives. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.